What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. I'm really excited for this one. I'm excited every single damn time I sit in front of this camera with Kevin Durso on the other side. Where we always begin is just checking in. Durso, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Fantastic. Fantastic. And why I'm fantastic? Well, the NHL is allowing fans. Well, I guess the NHL has always been allowing fans, but in our region, it's intensified a bit, and you're just seeing fans getting back into the stands in general throughout basketball, throughout hockey, with Citizens Bank Park here in Philly for the Phillies allowing fans in. It's just exciting to watch a game, and we both watched the Flyers play the Penguins as of late, and you saw fans in Pittsburgh. It just brings back what we love so much about sports, which is the atmosphere. So I'm pretty juiced up about it.
Yeah, I am too. There's clearly something missing when you're down there and you experience such an empty building like that. It's after a while the fake crowd noise starts to get to you a little bit. It's just, it doesn't make up for real people in the building. And I think because Pittsburgh, you mentioned already, I think the Rangers had fans within the last week. I think the Islanders are getting closer if they haven't already. The Devils are welcoming people back. Buffalo's getting ready to welcome people back. Philly's getting ready to welcome people back. It's like everything's kind of starting to come back to that now. And it'll be interesting. I mean, it's going to be, I think I alluded to this on 97.3 the other day talking about it too. Like, I think it's, the last time I was in the building under normal circumstances was March 10th of a year ago. And it was like, it's ironic that the Flyers are going to be home and I'm going to go cover a game where there's actual people in the stands to watch it on March 7th the following year. It's almost a year to date since we've had that normal experience. And it's not completely normal. It's not going to be a full house. You're going to have people wearing masks and things like that. But, at least there's people back and it can create a boost. I think we've seen it from these teams that have hosted games.
Yeah, I agree completely. And even just from a fan's perspective, when I watch the Penguins beat down on the orange and the black, and I'm watching drunk guys putting the beers up and celebrating with their Penguins masks on, it fired me up. So I can only imagine what it did to the players out there. But do you know any information right now on what does this mean for media members and all? Like, I know you guys moved in closer to the ice sheet, the ice surface, while there was no one there, which makes a lot of sense. But I don't even know how they plan on doing this. Upper bowls, like, you know what's another interesting thing about this all? And we're not going to dive too much into this whole thing just because COVID it's tiring, and I understand that. But it is an exciting time to get people back in there. The ticket prices, because you're only allowing X amount, is it going to be through the roof during a pandemic when people are losing jobs and all, or is it going to be more of that realistic amount where people can take their family? And to be clear, the realistic amount, I'll use air quotes here, is still pretty damn expensive.
Yeah, I hear you there. All right, let me try to go in order here.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't know exactly what the situation is yet. I believe the Flyers broadcast last night alluded to going back upstairs. So that tells me that I think they're opening up. There were enough good shots of the Pittsburgh crowd and the general arena setting to get an idea that they pretty much opened up the entire lower bowl and spaced people around. So I would expect something similar. Now, whether that means, when I say go back upstairs, whether that means all the way up to the very top of the building like we're usually, or maybe the upper bowl, like, where you can space people out even more. I wouldn't mind that, to be honest. It's not as high up as the balcony is, and it's not as high of a climb and you have to take an elevator to get there. Like, there's a way to actually rearrange the arena setting where we don't have to get into an elevator to get to where we need to go.
Right.
So maybe that's what it'll be. I don't know. It'll be interesting, but we'll
Yeah,
have
I
to wait
did.
and
It
see
is
on
funny
that.
though, just with the height of things. So you cover the Flyers. For me, in the beginning of 97.3, I covered the Sixers, and there would be some nights where I'm on the floor. I'm literally on the floor, but then when there was national TV games, TNT's there, and it gets a little heavier, I'm up top, and it's just crazy because when you cover the Flyers, you're always up there, right? It's not like you could be on the bench, or you could be, first row behind the glass, right behind Carter Hart. So it is just crazy to experience such an extreme, close vision of an NBA game and then go all the way up top. But everyone says it when you're watching hockey, getting that overview of the ice, you see the play develop differently. When you watch Ben Simmons dunk 2 inches away compared to 300 feet up in the air, it's definitely not the same in terms of explosiveness. But with hockey, I really do love watching the play develop, and you see the breakout start behind the net through the neutral zone. You see what happens. So I don't really mind that type of viewpoint on the game.
No, I don't either. I'm laughing like crazy at the fact that you mentioned putting us behind the glass or behind the benches. I'm sure if we were behind the benches, the coaches would love that, or the
Yeah.
players for that matter. Just to,
Well, it's better
you
than
know,
the Vancouver guys that dress up in the green dancing,
well,
whatever they call that.
that's true, but because I believe I texted you a story about one of the Boston games I covered earlier this year about how Bruce Cassidy yelled something across the ice at the officials that I'm not allowed to say on air.
Oh, sure you can. We're not on the radio.
That doesn't matter. I still don't say it on the air. I'm too professional for that, but nonetheless,
Oh,
um,
sorry. Sorry, you're too professional.
not when the red light's on. You know how that goes, but you know what I mean. And that's the part that like. I think that's the part that we don't need to hear typically in their minds anyway, in a coach's mind and a player's mind. It's like that's the stuff that when we're sitting where we normally are, we don't even get a sniff of that, So I think that's the fun part that I'm going to be losing out of this, because being down that close, I've heard a few things. I don't think I will anymore, but I do love the overall idea. Like when we're sitting up top, I love watching the play develop. And there's been nothing quite like watching 3-on-3 overtime from that vantage point, because boy, is there a lot of open ice out there. And to watch plays develop when 3-on-3, when players are all over the place like that, that's really something to watch. I mean, it's one thing that, I've kind of even admitted to you over like during the course of the show. I like the vantage point of the power play when I'm down there, because I'm kind of positioned in a spot where I'm kind of looking over the shoulder of the guy who's quarterbacking the power play.
Unfortunately, you're watching the Philadelphia Flyers power play, which is worse than any Mites team around this local area.
And not all the time. Sometimes I've watched games where I'm looking over the shoulder of Artemi Panarin. And then I'm looking over the shoulder of a guy who not only is setting guys up really well, but is looking to release too, So, but let's this way. I think maybe the timing is a little bit poor on this then, because guess what? You know who they're playing Sunday that I wouldn't have mind having that vantage point? They're playing Alex Ovechkin in the Capitals. And I'm not going to get to see that from that close probably if that's the case. And that'll be a little bit disappointing. But I've seen a lot of the others like that. I've seen Panarin. The Penguins power play, I believe I saw a couple times. I don't remember exactly who's over on that corner. I believe it's Crosby, but I'm not sure. It's usually a mixed bag with them, but
go ahead.
Yeah, but you get those guys, and it's not always, as disappointing as the Flyers power play.
Yeah,
I know. That's
a
story for another time.
We're throwing some fun out of here. And I hate to do this, but I'm so fascinated with thinking about some of this stuff. And I just wonder, like, media side of things when it comes to getting access to these players. And are we now stuck in a world where, look, all these franchises, if this could be this is how it goes moving forward with Zoom, and you pick and choose who you throw out there to the media. Like, it limits the PR nightmare if a team's going bad and things are going south. You don't have to put yourself in front of it the way that you would if 10, 15, 20 media guys are allowed in the locker room. And I'm scared, honestly, for the future of sports journalism and for the stories of the fans, the people that want to know the information. That's your job, to be able to get in there and get access to these players. And I'm just afraid that even when things are normal again, no more masks, no more any of this, that we're stuck in this world where, hey, guess what? You are talking to Claude Giroux and you're talking to, let's say, Jake Voracek, but Travis Konechny, or let's say Shane Gostisbehere. You want to get in and be like, hey, Gostisbehere, that turnover in the first period, whatever. You ask him a question, or it was the second period, but it doesn't matter about that. You don't have access now because they're giving you Claude Giroux and they're giving you Voracek, and I think that ruins a story for some of these journalists. Excuse me.
Yeah, I'll take it to a different level then on that too, because some of my favorite things that come from being in a locker room, and I don't even know if I write them or share them when I'm on the air or anything like that, but I might, depending on the situation, is let's say they lose a game, whatever it is. Maybe it's not even let's say it's not 5-2. Let's say it's 3-2 in overtime, close game, lost late. Let's take a game like the Boston game earlier this year when you led 3-1 and you lost 4-3 in overtime. The mood of the room is part of the story. So when we first get in there, we're in there almost immediately. So we're in there. They're still reacting to the situation to an extent. Now, on good nights, the music's playing because they want a game and it's all fun and games. And someone might make a joke about something. Someone may turn around and say something funny or whatever. Like, I've seen situations where there's two guys literally sitting there who are on the board for media avail, and they're just waiting for the next guy to get out of the line. And when they do, they look at each other and go, you want to go? Nah, you go. Okay. And then the guy's up, right? that's even just fun because it's a little exchange where they might crack a joke at each other and you can see how much fun they're having. I got the impression, that's why I kept saying all the time, it's a fun group a year ago, because I was in the room after games when they were winning all the time and on the long winning streaks before the pause happened. They were having fun, and they were having fun even, whenever I made it over to a practice. There were jokes going around or whatever, guys throwing tape around and stuff like that. That's the stuff that you lose when you're not physically there to see it. And that's what we're not there to see right now. So I do hope that at some point we get to go back and have those stories, because it just creates more, to me, it also creates more of a human element to the interview process too. These guys right now don't, maybe they know a little bit, but they don't completely, I mean, it's hard to judge it when you're not in the room all the time and you're not seeing them as often as you used to. So that's kind of a thing for me. I hope that we get that human element back, because it can enhance a lot of stories.
No doubt. That's what it hits the nail on the head right there is, the enhancing of the stories. One guy can talk to one person, get a perspective. Now it's everyone's getting all of the same information. Before, you could go talk to Justin Braun. You can go talk to Matt Niskanen or whoever, and maybe someone else talks to Joel Farabee, or someone talks to Travis Sanheim. So you just get different looks at it and all. But yeah, I think it's an interesting tie.
Right. No, here's the difference between the two. Like, after a game, it's typically still the same way. And the key difference to that is not necessarily, oh, you can go talk to whomever you feel like you need to. There are guys who kind of hang back and go, well, I'll wait until the crowd's gone, the scrum's over, and now I'll try to keep that guy for another 2 minutes just to ask something that nobody else got. That's the angle you lose there. One of my favorite things about going to do training camp or a practice or whatever is 9 times out of 10 when a practice was over, they just would they would start doing the stretches on the ice. You can kind of tell practice is wrapping up. They'd tell us go downstairs, and literally we'd walk into the locker room and they'd go, it's a free for all. Go to whoever you want. There's nobody we're going to grab and they might on occasion because it's somebody who they may need to tell. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Claude Giroux, after practice, is one of the first guys out of the locker room. He's in, out, done, and on to whatever he does following a practice. But that's a practice, not a game. He honors whenever he needs to be available for after a game, he honors it. But it's hard to get a hold of guys like him when it's, and either that or he waits for about 10 seconds for somebody to come up immediately and then goes, no one's coming over, I'm out. And that's it. But most of the guys do kind of sit there and take their time, and you wait it out, give them a chance to get, in, catch their breath a little bit, get some equipment off, and then go over and ask if they have a few minutes. And they typically oblige, and it's not, it's never a bad thing. One of the other things that's cool about that is also you can kind of do the interview. And if there's nobody else in the room at the time, because you're waiting for different guys to come off the ice, you can kind of have small talk with these guys and add even more of a human element. So that's the things that, like, right now are missed, and I hope that they come back.
I agree with you completely. I really do. But it is, just to summarize here, it's awesome to see people back in the stands. I'm excited to see where this goes. It's definitely missing, no doubt. I go back and watch all these old games, old playoff games. I'll watch old highlights at night just to kind of kick back and simmer down before I fall asleep. And the rush and the noise and the electric. Like, I went back and watched Vegas San Jose Game 7 highlights. Dude, talk about a crowd erupting. Just wild, and that's the stuff that you're missing. But we'll transition into some of the on-the-ice stuff that's happening now out there, and we'll start with the Toronto Maple Leafs because they continue to thrive. They've been doing it without Matthews and Anderson. It looks like they're about to get back in the lineup. Now, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, right before we see this McDavid-Matthews matchup. Or Wednesday,
Wednesday. You're ahead of yourself.
I know.
It's out on Thursday afternoon.
I
hope you're listening on a Thursday afternoon, people out there.
Damn right. But we aren't going to see that Austin Matthews game against Connor McDavid. But the real question is surrounding this Toronto Maple Leafs team, because they get mocked all the time. They lose. They lose in the playoffs. They can't beat the Boston Bruins. They have talented regular season wins, and they are a talented team, but they can never get over that hump. But when I watch this team play, I'll tell you what, Durso, they look legit, and they're scary. And I'm secretly, and I know Toronto Maple Leafs, it's everyone hates them, and it's like the Dallas Cowboys star. You're either with them or you're against them. But I love the Maple Leafs, and I'm somewhat minorly rooting for them to succeed. But they look scary good.
Yeah, they do. Look, I was very impressed by the weekend in particular because of the fact that when you have to play the Oilers without Austin Matthews, and the Oilers have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl kind of waiting for you, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think the weekend was going to go the way it did. They had back-to-back shutouts, like that's pretty darn impressive for this team. And they continue to do it, and they continue to move in the right direction. I mean, it felt like Marner took the place of Matthews this weekend and just like filled the void perfectly. And then you got all the other guys too. I mean, William Nylander has stepped up big time in the last couple of games and has been outstanding. And they're a loaded team. They're a loaded team that has a lot of talent on paper. They're living up to it. They're pretty much dominating a division that could be closer than it already is, because there's a lot of other teams that are close together, but they're starting to pull away from the pack at this point, and they're really establishing their place. Look, the questions about their potential in the playoffs are always going to remain until they actually win a playoff series. That's the bottom line. We can sit here and talk about this team every single week, every episode we have for the rest of the regular season, and it's still a question because it's not the playoffs yet. And it's funny to listen to, as you've talked about before, the criticism that they get, or that guys like, Tavares isn't scoring enough.
Now that started
Nylander's not scoring enough, right?
It's starting to change a little bit. That whole narrative of those two and where this team is, listening to that market right now, it has changed a bit from the beginning where they were ripping Nylander and ripping Tavares. I think they're starting to now get a little sucked in on, hey, this team is scary good. And maybe they were just nervous to commit to that early on because they know the pain and they've been through the struggle.
Yeah, you know why it's actually died down probably? When did we record that episode? The one where we were talking about the Leafs and all that stuff.
Probably episode one, right? When we broke down the North Division.
Was it 1 or was it 2? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, was it 1 or partially part of 2 when we were talking about another division just to throw it in there? It was early though, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking back like a couple of weeks ago or whatever. They've lost 1 game since, what is it, February 15th? And that was an overtime loss too. So like, they lost a game to Montreal, and then they've lost a game in overtime to Ottawa. And then after that, I got 2 wins against Ottawa, 1 against Montreal, a loss to Calgary, a comeback win against Calgary, and now 2 against Edmonton. They're playing a third against Edmonton on Wednesday night. When you're winning, some of the questions disappear. But as soon as they lose a game, if they lose this game to Edmonton tonight, guess what? The questions are going to come out that Nylander didn't do enough or Tavares didn't do enough and whatever, and this guy didn't show up. It happens in every market in one way, shape, or form. It's just much more profile when it's Toronto like that, because for Toronto, this is the NFL. This is the major market team, all that stuff, like in that sense, because it is, Toronto in Canada, in the North Division, the place where the Hockey Hall of Fame is located, all that stuff. So that's why it's so important to them and why it's headlined so much. But that's basically the bottom line. When it's going well, the questions disappear a little bit. And when it's not going well, everybody thinks something's wrong.
And you mentioned the shutouts, the back-to-back shutouts and all. They're doing this without Anderson in play. And we haven't even touched on, they've always had the firepower, right? They've always had the scoring and these crazy forwards. And they're bringing in all these guys and the signing the money and the salary cap. Like, that was such a huge conversation. But everyone is then ripping Jake Gardiner for going dash 75,000 in Game 7. And they were questioning Freddie Anderson and all. And now, you got a depth. It looks like 3 guys you can play in between the pipes. Campbell, Hutchinson. You end up having Freddie Anderson. But the D-core, how many question marks are surrounding the D-core right now? And look, there's always going to be this scared feeling. But they have looked cleaner and smoother than they ever have. And that was such a big hole in their game. Jake Gardiner was getting destroyed. Now, did he get a little unfair criticism at time? Maybe. Maybe that's the power of the market really forcing that. But their defense has been such a big upgrade this year from goaltending out, and that's been big. They haven't had it.
Yeah, and I'm wondering which angle to take on why it's been so much better, because Morgan Riley's been a part of this team for how long, and he's been through the ups and downs of good regular seasons, bad playoffs, not doing enough in the playoffs, all that type of stuff, right? They acquired Jake Muzzin a few years back, and that has worked out for them. Again, same kind of thing. Fine in the regular season, but in the playoffs, it doesn't seem to come together. They've got some of the young guys who have grown into the roles a little bit, and it's starting to come around for them as well. But I think that the 2 guys that stand out to me are actually alphabetically at the top of the defensive list. It's Zach Bogosian and TJ Brody. They're the 2 guys to me who you added from the outside that are veterans, that you knew what you were getting with them coming in, and they've been everything that I think you wanted them to be. And it adds to the depth because, is Bogosian that big of a name? Probably not, but you do need those guys too. You need the third pairing guys or whatever it is. Like, it's not just about the biggest name you can sign. And believe me, Brody was one of the big names out there in free agency among defense, probably right after Alex Pietrangelo. He was probably the next highest guy in line. And they've done what they've had to do. They've got, I don't want to say that Anderson's, middle of the road type goalie. He can be above average when he's on top of his game, but like, you see the playoff version and you go, well, he's typical Freddie Anderson, Yeah, that's what it is in the playoffs. I think that they look like a team that's on a mission right now to erase those doubts about them right now. And it's still too early to tell, because I don't think that there's much of a doubt anymore that this team will probably be in the playoffs, because I think that's
a good take. That's a good take.
Yeah, well, because even though it's still technically early in the season in a way, I don't think it's too early anymore. I just think, you're carving out a good path for yourself, that even if you go on a 3-game losing streak, even if you lose 3 against the same team, you'll probably still be there when the time comes and when you get things back in order. But there's been a lot of things that haven't derailed this team. Wayne Simmons was going good and got hurt, and everybody went, oh no, what a loss in the locker room, all that type of stuff. They look fine. And then Anderson's been out, and Austin Matthews goes out, and they just keep winning games. So who am I to argue that this team is not a playoff team or has a shot to fall out of the playoff race or have their chances be in danger, when they've carved out this nice path for themselves to be right there at the top from now until the end of the season? There's no reason not to think that.
I'm at the point where I think they're winning the cup. I really do. I think they're winning the cup, baby. You mentioned Simmons. I think that's great, because it somewhat ties into, I wanted to bring up some of their role pieces. And I feel like saying role player for one of them might be giving him a disservice, but he's not an Austin Matthews. We talked about, when you think of the Maple Leafs, Matthews is clearly number one. Marner, Tavares, Nylander. This guy flies under the radar, but I think he plays a big role, and that's Zach Hyman, right? Like, this guy plays a good role, and he's always there, and you can move him up and down the lineup. He can play on any line. Seriously, he can play on any line and do it at an efficient pace. And then you get someone like Jason Spezza, who thinks it's 1964 again, when he was unbelievable, right? The guy is fake clap bombing, and then he's going down the right side and finding twine. Might have been bad goaltending, but who cares? The guy is just finding ways in 20, I'm looking up his stats here, in 22 games. For a 93-year-old, this isn't too bad. In 22 games, he's got 12 points, and if you would have told the Maple Leafs coming into the season that that's what you would have at this point of the year for Jason Spezza, I think that they would be stoked. So my point is, the role players are even really performing at the rate that they need to. Why are you laughing so hard?
Did you just call him a 93-year-old?
Yeah, and I also said he played in his prime in 1964. The guy's like 63 right now. You know what I mean?
Well, sure, whatever. I'm glad you pointed him out, though, because he was the guy I was thinking of before you mentioned Zach Hyman. And Hyman's a great example of a guy who flies under the radar on a team that has so many other key pieces. You're right. When you have Matthews and Marner and Tavares and, the list goes on and on, Nylander, all those guys. And even when you look at, because Spezza kind of compares to a Joe Thornton in a way, but Thornton's the bigger name because, let's face it, we all know where he's going to end up in a few years one way or another. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. So we sit there and we go, okay, he's the headlining name. We don't think like that for Spezza, and we don't think the same way we don't think of Hyman as this top 6 presence, but he can be. He's done it before. They put him next to Matthews in various situations, and it works out a lot of the time. So it's good to have that depth, and it's good to have that depth that's flexible. Like, another guy who I've been impressed with this season is Alex Kerfoot. He's been another one who just seems to be able to go into whatever role you want him to be and find a way to make it work. And that's what the most successful teams do. They find a way to make things work and find a way to win games, even when the lineup isn't the most optimal it can be. And I think that the weekend was a great example, because you're playing the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid. And it's almost like you have to say it like that. You have to say you're facing Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. It's not even just one team. You're facing this headline player. But people say that about Toronto in a way too. It's Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But when it's not Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs or without him, and you still find a way to not only win the game, but to dominate the game, shut them out, make it look like they didn't even have a chance in the game, now you're making a big statement. So I think that that's where Toronto is right now, is that they've made a lot of big statements. And there might not be any looking back for them, at least in the regular season. I'm not going to jump too far ahead and say they're a cup team completely because playoffs haven't started yet, but
dude, I'm a secret closet Toronto Maple Leafs fan, by the way.
You are a secret closet Toronto Maple Leafs fan because you've also admitted to listening to Toronto sports talk radio just to hear them talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. So
dude,
there we go.
I love them. I think they're so much fun to watch. By the way, I'm looking back right now at Jason Spezza's stats from back in his prime. My man put up in 2005, 90 points. In 2006, 87. In 2007, 92. He had 84 in 2011, man. When he was on that run with Ottawa, he was a beast. And now it's just crazy. I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, he's getting older, but the last 3 seasons, 8 goals, 8 goals. I just wonder what it's like. And he's clearly adapted to this new role and this new identity. But to go from someone who was scoring 34 goals a year, I mean, when I just gave you those numbers, he was scoring 34 goals a year. He was getting up there. And now you're 8. Like, what is the transition like? How do you mentally prepare? And clearly, you have to adapt to, like, hey, I'm a role guy now, 4th line. Like, it's not the same. But I just wonder what it's like being out there going like, damn, man, I should score 34 of these bad boys.
You know, I just pulled up the stats, too. That's why I'm looking at it right now. Talk about consistency. He's topped out at 34 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, that's great. And there's another year in there with 33, by the way. So
back-to-back years, he went 34. And with less games, too. I mean, that played a big 67 games instead of 76, but he was a dog in his prime.
Yeah, he really was. And, you know, like, you're right. He's adjusting to the role really well. I looked, you know, looking at his stats this year even, you know, 5 goals, 12 points in 22 games. That's pretty good rate, all things considered, for where you are in your career. And maybe he's fitting in perfectly in that type of role where you're not the lead guy anymore. I think he knows that, but you're probably having a lot of fun right now from all the years you played in Ottawa, playing in Dallas, waiting for that opportunity to be on a team that could go out and potentially win a Stanley Cup. And, you know, I'm not going to discredit what you said earlier, you know, like with your take on you think that they're winning the cup. They have a shot because they're going to probably be there, and they probably will be there as a number 1 seed in the North Division based on the way things are going. So he's got to enjoy what he's going through right now because of the fact that he's on a team that has the potential to actually come away with the Stanley Cup and get him the ultimate prize that I'm sure he's still playing for.
Didn't Babcock scratch him his first game back in Toronto last year?
I don't remember if it was his first game back in Toronto, but like the thing that I remember about that was that was like the final straw for Babcock. Like there was already tension as it was. And
so that was that was after the Marner thing? I forget exactly the timeline of it all because it was such a disaster. But
that whole thing was a mess. And
he's coaching again, by the way, like a college in Alberta.
Yeah, I know. Well, and apparently he's still doing the NBC stuff too.
Dude, he has the way that he look. I'm no shame on the way people speak, right? But man, Babcock talking is like, wow. First, 0 personality and just like that strong, thick accent where I'm like, dude, what are you even saying?
I remember when that release came out that he was going to be doing studio work, and you know, I actually, like, when I read it, I'm like, because it was coupled with Ryan Callahan was going to be doing it. I'm like, I want to give Ryan Callahan a chance at this. I think, you know, when I've watched some of the former players who have gone into that role, you know, Patrick Sharp is excellent at it. He's amazing. You know, and then I think I'm not even thinking about just the guys on the NBC side, but like the NHL Network side, because Kevin Weeks is great. And, you know, and they've got, you know, between Keith Jones, Anson Carter, you know, like they have a lot of good analysts that come on and do that. I'm like, Ryan Callahan probably is going to fit right in with this. He's probably going to know exactly how to do this, and he'll be probably good at it. I wouldn't be shocked at all. But that one got me a little bit. Like, there are other guys who I think have done it before. Like, believe it or not, I think that in the years that they had off from coaching, Peter Laviolette did it before he got hired by the Flyers again. And I think that Tortorella did it before he got the Vancouver job, I believe.
You know who I hate though right now who tries to do it? Man, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, Boudreaux.
Yeah, I literally said that over the weekend. I can't take it seriously.
No, it's bad. It's bad. I saw a report, by the way. I know we're kind of bouncing around right now, but apparently he might have. I mean, clearly he's looking for a job as a coach. So I don't know how much to put stock into this, but I saw the headline pop out. I didn't click on the link, but him in Seattle. Now, if you're Seattle, okay, I was going to say, if you're Seattle, is he on the top of your priority, or do you maybe go the Claude Julien route now that he's available?
You look at anybody who's available, I think, and anybody who has experience doing it. So, yeah, I think that Bruce Boudreau is on the list. I think Claude Julien is on the list. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else out there who's good. I mean, for
Dave
all I know,
Hackstall.
no, he's not available though. He's an assistant coach. There's a difference. These are guys who literally aren't coaching at the moment. I was actually thinking the name that I think who still doesn't have a job at the moment. It doesn't isn't Gerard Gallant still out of work right now? And
Wow.
that would be a really interesting dynamic, because can you imagine if they bring him in to be the first head coach of the next expansion team after he was the first head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights? That would be something.
Yeah, no doubt. That's insanely intriguing as a storyline, and I hated what the Vegas Golden Knights did, to be honest with you. But they keep winning. I mean, look, it's not like they had a huge downfall or whatever. They're still a very competitive team, but I didn't like the way that went. But I also didn't love the way that the next topic went here, Durso, because this was bad news Bears. You can't make this up. I was talking to a couple of my buddies that play around the league, not for the Calgary Flames, and I was like, yo. What was that? And their response was, it's crazy because you can have one thing go wrong, like one guy falls during warmups. Ha ha ha, you laugh, you go on. Everyone's had a teammate that did it once in a blue moon. But the fact that Lucic is falling over, two guys are banging into one another at the blue line. Gaudreau backhands a puck and it hits Monahan in the back of the head. Like, all of this happens in the same exact warm-up is seriously almost impossible. And I think, unfortunately, it shows where the Calgary Flames are right now. But would you take a lot of stock out of that? Because I honestly do. And I know that sounds crazy because it's so out there and it's so ridiculous that occurred. But I really think it is telling to who the Flames are this year.
Yeah, I don't know about how much stock I take out.
I'm putting stock into it.
Okay, you're putting stock into it. No, listen, there are things that I do look at, and like, ironically enough, the things that I typically look at, aside from the telltale getting the line combinations for the game, which is a really easy, an easy exercise to do when you're watching warmups. So many times warmups are, at least from my perspective anyway, in the media side, they're uneventful. You see the same things, and after a while, like, you basically watch until you figure out who's in the lineup, and then let the rest of it play out. There's nothing else for you to pay attention to from where I'm at anyway. You go get some other stuff done, put out the information that you know about who's in or who's out or who's not on. Like, there's actually an anticipation from my side of waiting for the start of it, because at the start you try to see who even comes out. If there's anybody who's a question mark, this, like we were just talking about the Leafs with Austin Matthews being out. If there was nothing and they said, he's a game time decision, and we'd be waiting for 6:30 at night for a 7:00 game to hear Austin Matthews is on the ice, or Freddie Anderson's your starting goalie because he led them onto the ice. Like, those are the signs that we look for. And then you watch line rushes and it's over. But this was so eventful. This was just craziness. And look, I know you played much more intensely. I only ever played for recreation, and it was so long ago and things like that. But when we didn't do anything at the level I did, where warm-ups were anything more than just taking a few shots, stretching out a little bit, and then, okay, let's go, But I know that there's a method to the madness that goes on there. I mean, you've seen this stuff too, Brodes, with the guys who stay on the ice until they're the last one off. Right. The guys who, when they're the last one off.
Who did rock, paper, scissors? Who did that? The two teams.
Was that earlier this year? Because I remember earlier this year there was a what was it? Marchand and Zibanejad did that.
Okay,
like,
I don't remember.
Like, waited each other out. I don't know about the rock paper scissors thing, but they waited each other out, I believe. And I'm actually talking about, like, there's another one. There was a good one the other day that I saw. I'm trying to remember who exactly it was, but there was a who was it who turned the net around?
Oh,
do you remember seeing that? Turn the net around because the guy on the other side shoots for the empty net from his own zone.
That's right. Let me see if I
can't remember who it was, but I saw it. It was outstanding. And trust me, the reason I actually even pointed out is because I believe at one point in time, there's different guys who do it. I believe that, like, Jake Voracek likes to shoot at the empty net at the end of a Flyers warm-up, right? Well, there were times where there was one game where Evgeny Malkin stayed on the ice so he could block the shot. Or Marchand did that too, or something like that. Like, there's guys who stay out there and go, I know what you're trying to do, and I'm waiting for you to be done.
It was Kuznetsov did it to Malkin.
All right, well, there you go. See?
Yeah.
Like that, yeah. But that's outstanding because that shows that, like, they pay attention to these little things and whatever. That's almost half the entertainment of it. Like, there were times where we would sit there and, actually, I'm not kidding you, count the number of times Jake Voracek shot at the empty net, because there were times he would take 1, 2, or 3, until he either made it or didn't make it or whatever. And he's kind of cut down on it since, but we like knew it was a thing. You know what I mean? Like we knew that this is like a ritual. I mean, even Carter Hart back in his junior days was like, had to be the last one off the ice after every single period and warmups, not just the warm-up period or whatever. So everybody has their own little things. And sometimes it makes it easy to get lost in your own little world and maybe not on the same page with everybody else. And it leads to things like that. I don't know. I mean, I know there's been some severe ones like that where, yeah, a guy falls and gets hurt pretty badly or something like that.
Well, remember Taylor Hall?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
now, there was actually really, and this ties in nicely with what you just said about that, because there were guys there was a couple things that were out there after that happened, by the way, where they're wondering, and maybe as a former player, you can kind of jump in and tell me what you think of this. I mean, probably rules might have been different for the level you played at, but they're saying they should mandate helmets during warmups because you don't want to have a top guy get hit in the head with, it's not hard for a puck to hit the post the wrong way or be off of something or someone to just fire away and miss, and it to wind up off of the head of your teammate and possibly seriously injuring him. So what do you think of that? Because like I saw that and I'm like, I understand why they give the players a choice, and I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I could see where the league would sit there and say we have to step in before somebody gets seriously hurt too.
Yeah, I honestly, I think that they should wear buckets. I don't understand why they don't. It is crazy, but back in the day, they didn't even wear them playing, and it just kind of snowballed into where it is now, where you can choose and have the option. But I think that if there's, like, what's the risk here? Does the risk... It's a high risk, low reward situation is my point. I don't see why it's even a question anymore. Now, remember, people used to just go no visor. Then they implemented everyone has to have the visor. How come this hasn't followed yet where, okay, now it's everyone has to have their helmet on? And maybe it just takes, unfortunately, the world we live in, it takes situations like Taylor Hall, like Monahan. It's going to take someone to get seriously injured. I know Monahan wasn't seriously injured, but it takes that for it to be put on notice, and then you move forward from there. But in my opinion, they should all have buckets on, just because I don't think the strengths of it really outweighs the positives that can happen from it, and all. So it's silly, but just the creature of habit thing. And if I got thrown out of my rhythm during warmups, I was lost for the game. So I can only imagine what it would be like if 6 things went wrong, even if it wasn't me, and I noticed 6 of my teammates did something that dreadful. I'm like, are we prepared for this game? Are we ready? Are we locked in? Even if it wasn't my personal fault, I then start questioning what is happening to our team, and are we going to be engaged properly, because that will throw the entire room off.
Yeah, you're definitely right about how an off warm-up can lead to an off game. That was what I kept seeing the whole time, is this team didn't look ready for that game on Monday night. Not only that, but I wanted to touch on the point that you made about it taking a serious injury to maybe lead to this idea that helmets during warm-ups are mandated. I think that the reason we even talk about this as a subject is because of, like you said, they played back in the day. There were no helmets, and visors weren't mandatory before. It's as we learn things about concussions and eye injuries and things like that, and serious, like post-injury reactions that you have where it can damage more than just the rest of your career, it can damage the rest of your life. And that's why I think we're seeing more of a response to this like that. Like, the more we know now, the more likely it is that we're going to look at an incident like that and go, that's not just something you can laugh off and say it's no big deal. I think that that's where we turn the attention to. You've got to maybe make everybody wear helmets for the safety of the players, just because, who knows when someone's career is going to get cut short because this happens during a warm-up.
Maybe they do something, and it kind of sounds ridiculous, but maybe they do something similar to the visor, where if you come into the league at a certain point, like all the old heads cannot wear a helmet, but once they get weaved out of the league, then eventually everyone has to wear the helmet, so they don't make their veterans now unhappy, but as the years move forward, it's just natural and standard that everybody's doing it. Maybe that's the way they do it moving forward. It is pretty ridiculous.
It almost is a little bit now, like there's not too many people out there I can think of who are on the younger end, at least in the ones that I see, who are on the younger end, who go, I'm not wearing a helmet during warmups. Most of them do. So
that's a good point. Yeah, it is. So maybe they just naturally do it. They won't even have to mandate it, because everyone makes that decision, because, as you alluded to, we know more information. We have more information. Here's one thing we don't have a lot of information about, though. The decisions by the Montreal Canadiens to fire everybody every single week. It's crazy. You should keep your phone open. You might get a call for the next goalie coach or something.
Yeah. You think I'm going to be a goalie coach?
Well, look, they're making moves there, it seems. So my question to you is,
I am far from qualified to be a goalie coach. I can tell you that.
With the decisions they're making right now, I don't know, is qualification actually a thing? My point
Sean
is,
Burke is a much more qualified goalie coach than I will ever be.
all right, you're ruining my joke, damn it. The Montreal Canadiens are firing people left and right, fire sale, yard sale, you name it. Are they being too knee-jerk reactionist? Or does this make sense? Look, my thing is, Carey Price is Carey Price. I understand the value of a goalie coach, and I understand the value of tweaking some things and doing things here. But at the end of the day, you have Carey Price, and that's the most important thing to me. So this isn't game-changing by any means, but it's just it's an insane storyline to what's already been an insane story in Montreal from the beginning of the season to now.
Yeah, and the timing was a little weird for the goalie one, too, because of the fact that, they won. They won a game and snapped a losing streak, 5-game losing streak, right? So
yes,
it's weird that they like the timing of that as well. But I don't know. It does sound like wholesale changes at the coaching level. It really does, and it's not making a lot of sense right now. All right, so so you go on a losing streak and you decide this is the time to move on from Claude Julien and Kirk Muller, and you figure something out there. You're going to use an interim coach for the rest of the year and that type of thing. But now you do another move right after that, and it involves more of the coaching staff. And it's like, yeah, maybe you are being a little bit too knee-jerk reaction to this whole thing and trying to figure out where to put it. I mean, Mark Bergevin had a press conference today that was just, I won't call it outrageous, but there was some back and forth heated moments because people were asking, are you holding Carey Price accountable enough for this? Or is there no accountability for Carey Price at all with the way that he's played or whatever to do something like this? And he shot back right away. Of course there's, accountability. Everybody's accountable. He knows he needs to play better and things like that. But, this is probably very fitting for a team that's where they are. And I agree 1,000% with something Bergevin said today, which is it is on the players to play the game the right way and to make the successes happen at every position. It's on the goalie to know how to be in the right position, to stop shots, to leave fewer rebounds, do something that makes it productive on that end. It's on the defenseman to be in the right position to help out the goaltender. It's on the forwards to help out the defense in the defensive zone and turn that into offense. And sometimes that's on the defenseman as well. But like Bergevin was basically saying, it's not just Carey. Like Carey Price is held accountable. Ben Sherratt's held accountable. Jeff Petry's held accountable. Shea Weber's held accountable. The whole Brendan Gallagher is held accountable. Like they're all held accountable in some way. And that's, I've been saying this about the Flyers for years in my coverage. After some point in time, it's not the GM's fault anymore, and it's not the coach's fault. It is the players who have to be judged based on how things look. And if the players are finally judged for that, then that's when changes are made to that part of it. You've made just about every other change you can make, except for the GM, obviously, because Bergevin's still there. But you've now dismantled almost this entire coaching staff. And what's the next step then? The next step is either the GM goes to because he's not doing anything to address the problems on the ice, or the players start to go because the GM is now taking matters into his own hands and saying, this is what's going to happen with our team because it's not good enough. So, you evaluate the players based on how they're playing and if they're doing the right things. And, that's what accountability is all about in this game. And if you're not having enough of it, then, I don't doubt that there isn't enough of it. I agree with what he said, where his job is also when it comes to putting a coaching staff together, it's putting the right pieces in place so the players succeed as best they can. But it's still up to the players to take all of that information, to take the systems, to take the X's and O's of whatever plays you're going to run and however you're going to structure your power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5 play, neutral zone, you name it. It's up to you to execute it properly and to do all of the small things that are involved in execution, which it goes from playing sound defense positionally, blocking shots, knowing how to break out of the zone, knowing how to enter the other zone, all of it. You have to be good at every area in order to be a successful team.
I always blame players over coaches all the time. Now, there is a level where, hey, maybe the coach lost the voice, or maybe you need a change just to, get a different view in there, get a new message in there. There's always time. Every coach it gets fired. That's the reality of the situation. Every coach, there's never a coach that's so good, they never don't get fired. It always happens. Your job, you will always fail by the end of it because at some point you are fired, even when you are a great head coach. So it's a reality of the situation. But I always blame the players more than the coaches. And I forget where I heard this from, and I'm going to sound like an idiot or feel like an idiot if it is very standard and known. But I remember hearing about how there was a GM and there was a team that just wasn't playing good enough. They weren't playing well enough. And the GM went in there, and it might have been Brian Burke because I listened to him talk a lot, but maybe that could be way out of the box, and it wasn't him at all. He went in there and was like, this is the team. Right, this is the team. Right here, this is the team. We're not making moves. We're not firing anybody. Figure it out. This is who you are. And it was like that message really turned everything around, and that was the difference out there. Now, does that message stand out to you? Am I going crazy here, or is this a good story?
No, it's a good story. Okay, I wish I knew exactly. I wish I knew exactly which team it was, too, because I don't know which team it is. But you know what?
I wonder if the Habs, if they did that, would that change the mindset of, all right, because I think now it's too reactionary. We got to pull the trigger and all these moves. If someone went in there and said, this is who you are, figure it out, maybe it changes.
Well, I'm going to say two things then about this then, because first of all, one of the comments I see a ton about is, in my coverage of the Flyers anyway, is, oh, it's Alain Vigneault's fault that the team struggles against this team or in this situation. Oh, the power play's awful, so Michel Therrien's got to go. The penalty kill's awful, Ian LaPerriere's got to go. They're not the ones out there actually doing the job, though. I understand that you might think there could be a better resource out there or whatever, but they're not the ones doing the job. So if they're not the ones doing the job, why do we keep going back to that? Alain Vigneault's in his second year as head coach of the Flyers. You really think he's the problem and that he's the voice that's lost on this team or whatever it is? He's not the problem. I get sick of hearing that. And I remember telling you earlier in the year when I was on 97.3 for a spot because we were talking about the defenseman thing. And I turned around after one of the games. It was early on. It might have been one of the 6-1 losses that the Flyers had earlier in the year. And I said, my message to the team is, I know they need another top 4 defenseman. I get it. But the answer right now is, you're not getting any help right now, so figure it out. That's what you have to do. And I think that's a great message because it does put the onus on the players to be better and to show that they are worthy of being a team that can make it that far. And if they don't show they are, then you either have to go out and try to help. And that's the thing I keep, like, if there is one thing that I can say from every time the Flyers lose a game by 3 goals or whatever it is, believe me, every GM in the league is trying to make their team better this year. It's just not that easy. This is not NHL 21 where you get to draw up whatever trade you want and get the player you want. They're trying as hard as they can. It's just not that easy. So in the meantime, you best figure it out for yourself and play the best you can to get to the point that you need to before you can acquire those pieces. Because believe me, down the road as the season goes on, the trade deadline's about a month and a half away at this point. There will be teams that get desperate to sell and teams that get desperate to buy, and the price tags that are at the level that they are now will be much more reasonable to the team that's going, I need that one piece. If you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, okay, and you're right there a month later, you got 1 month to go, and you're missing a third line center or another good defenseman or whatever, the price tag for that guy becomes much more reasonable when desperation time hits, when you go, this is the time to make that move, and I don't care what I have to give up to make it happen. I'll find a way to make it happen. But right now, it's hard to do. So the best thing you can do is spread the message to your team. You're not getting any help. So go figure it out for yourself. I think it's an outstanding message.
It definitely is. And you know what else is hard to do? Unfortunately, it's hard to end
Wrap
this
up
show.
This
Yeah, I know. I love it so much, man. I always enjoy this. I thought today was a very fun episode, just bouncing around the Canadian division and talking about what's going on here. So I had a blast. And as always, everyone, we will see you next time.